Jumbo, welcome.
Welcome, Jumbo.
This is Operation Power, a voice for Black radical politics and revolutionary change. We're glad that you're with us. We've got an exciting program.
Yes, we do.
We're going to have Black women talking about the U.S.-Israel war on Iran. And we've got some great guests. We're going to be introducing them shortly. But we just want to let you know that Operation Power is a part of the Black Power Media Reloaded family. And we are pleased to be a part of that, talking about Black perspective. We do have a video that we want to share with you, and we're going to do a libation video because we believe that as we begin each program, we want to call our ancestors into the setting and have them be a part of what it is that we'll be doing. So we have a brief video that we will share with you at this time.
Nothing important happens without a libation. And so for this very important presentation, we begin by the pouring of libation. We pour libation first to our first ancestor, to that hidden one who, though hidden, manifests in all things as all things, that God-goddess idea in the universe by any and all names. To our first ancestor, we pour libation, Ashe. We pour libation too to our ancestors because they were the first people on this planet, mothers and fathers of all mankind, flashpoint of the human family. To those ancestors we pour libation, Ashe. Pour libation too to our ancestors because they were the ones who first gave birth to the idea of civilization, knew we would need a form of governance, and they nurtured that idea along the Nile until it reached its zenith in Kemet. There they built these gigantic monuments as evidence of that great civilization, and they carved instructions on the walls of temples and tombs for us, so we would never forget. To those ancestors we pour libation, Ashe. Pour libation too to our ancestors because over time they put together all the tenets of civilization and they took those ideas and left the continent. They were the people of the first Exodus. They left Africa and went all over the world and peopled the world. To those ancestors we pour libation, Ashe. We pour libation too to our ancestors because they did not sit on their laurels. They continued to improve, continued to evolve, and at each point of evolution, they again would leave the continent and settle and resettle the planet. They met themselves coming and going. To those ancestors we pour libation, Ashe. Pour libation too to those ancestors because over time, they found themselves the object of a forced exodus when they were kidnapped, shackled, cargoed, shipped out of Africa and enslaved in diasporas around the world. To those ancestors we pour libation, Ashe. Pour libation too to the ancestors left at home, the very young, the aged, the infirm, left to reinvent themselves, depleted of us, human resources. But they were enjoined by us in the diasporas, both objects of a global myopia that ruptured the soul of a people as it ravaged a continent. To those ancestors we pour libation, Ashe. Pour libation too to those ancestors because over time they began to remember who and what they were. Because no matter where they had been dropped off, they still retained bits and pieces of who and what they were. They retained that African core that described them. They began to remember bits and pieces of a song. They began to remember lines from a rhythm. They began to remember dances that they did in ancient times. They began to remember those ancient drum beats that they now beat out on bare skin. And so to those ancestors we pour libation, Ashe.
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 So important that we have our ancestors who've paved the way, who brought us thus far and passed the torch to us. And now it's our responsibility to carry it forward, spread the word and teach our children, as has been said. We also have another brief video that we want to share with you. And it's a video which gives you some snippets of what Operation Power is all about, how we got started, and a few of our accomplishments. Keru, our engineer, will bring that forward.
Operation Power stands for people organizing and working for empowerment and respect.
Operation Power is a grassroots social justice organization founded by local community stakeholders, which includes activists, organizers, and leaders who understand that the system as it is currently structured, is destroying us and our communities.
The system, the capitalist system, one that promotes human greed over human need, one that promotes profit over people, needs to be dismantled. These local community organizers recognize capitalism needs to be destroyed and replaced with socialism.
Operation P.O.W.E.R was founded in 1997 with the understanding that uprooting capitalism needs to begin locally. Operation P.O.W.E.R understood that our communities are the perfect vehicle to dismantle this parasitic capitalist system brick by brick, and the economic, political, and cultural institutions and other systems in place in our local community infrastructure. Whether it's the local school board, community board, city council, state assembly, all represents mechanisms to control the destiny of our people.
Thank you so much. And we just want to highlight some books that we feel you would be interested in reading. The first one is written by Charles Barron, and it is entitled Speaking Truth to Power. And it is a collection of articles and essays and writings on leadership and other events over the time. The second one is It's Not You, It's Capitalism. Why It's Time to Break Up and How to Move On, written by Malika Jabali. And it's a great study in what capitalism is and a part of its history. Next recommendation that we have for you is a novel. It is written by Kevin Barron, and it is called Black Rising, and it's a page turner. So make sure that you don't have to get up early the next day, because you're going to want to finish it at one sitting. The second in the trilogy written by Kevin Barron is called Black Rising, Home and Abroad, and it's a continuation of the previous book, the first book. And the third in the trilogy is called The Threat. All of them exciting, reading, talking about Black revolutionary acts and building our country and building our Black country and how we're going to make that reality. So we're pleased to bring to you now our guests. Our topic is Black women speak on the Israel-U.S. war on Iran. And we've got two great guests that we have with us at this time. We have Margaret Kimberly from the Black Agenda Report. She's a journalist, she's an activist, and she's the author of the book Prejudential. Oh, she's got it right there, Prejudential. So we encourage you to get that. Black Americans and the Presidents, great reading material. And the other guest that we have with us is Colette P.O.W.E.R of the December 12th movement. And she was recently honored by the UNRA for the work that she has done over the years. Colette, we're so pleased that you're here with us. We know we're going to have an exciting discussion today. So welcome to both of you.
Well, welcome to both of you. And Inez and I were excited all day about having you on and getting your perspectives on the struggle. As people know by now, you should know by now that Iran was attacked by America and Israel. And understand that these countries involved, Iran is like thousands of years old. Iran was Persia, and then it evolved into Iran later. And then remember, Iran had a democratically elected socialist, Mohammad Mossadegh, in 1953. And the CIA and the Britain, and they collaborated to get rid of him. Why? Because he was nationalizing the oil. And then after they did get rid of him, duly elected, got rid of him, and they brought in who? The P.O.W.E.R dynasty, the Shah of Iran, a butcher, a murderer, and his Savak police. Then in 1979, Iran had a revolution, and they brought in the Ayatollah Khomeini in 1979, and then the rest is history. 1989, he died, and then came the new leadership, and Israel murdered the new leadership. And don't fall for the bogus stuff about they trying to stop them from building nuclear weapons. Just to let you know, Iran had the Natanz uranium enrichment facility since 2003. If they wanted a nuclear weapon, they would have had it by now. That's not the issue. In addition to that, Israel has a nuclear weapon, 80 of them, 90. Nobody talks about Israel's warheads. Nobody talks about America's warheads. They have more than everybody, Russia and America. And America was the only country that dropped an atomic bomb in the 1940s on Nagasaki and Hiroshima, killing hundreds of thousands of innocent people. So we see this war now as a war against China, a war against Russia, a war for the global economy. And we wanted to get another perspective on that war that they're losing, by the way. Don't believe in the news that you're hearing. They are losing. But with that little backdrop, we know in 2026, this summer, America will be only 250 years old. Israel is only 70 some odd years old. These are new kids on the block going crazy. So I'm going to turn it over to our guest now as that little intro from our perspective. And then we'll start off with Sister Colette, and then we'll go to Sister Kimberly. Sister Colette, welcome.
Thank you. And first, let me say it is so important that we are having this conversation. Margaret has been writing, and I've seen the different essays, and we have also, in December 12th, been putting out statements and being involved in both organizations in demonstrations in the streets, because it is crucial that our people understand that this relates to us, that as you laid out, the economic struggle that is going on in the world, that Africa is involved in, and that we Africans in the diaspora are also involved in. We have to see the global context. You laid out the importance of Iran in terms of oil, but also the importance of Iran as part of the growing global South. Iran is part of what is known as BRICS, which is the Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, as well as many other countries who are attempting to do more trading amongst themselves, attempting to steer their economies from being pointed towards the West to being pointed internally. It is a coalition of countries that has an enormous number of population, enormous amount of wealth. And at the same time, they're talking about changing from the dollar base to different methods. And it's a challenge. I know Margaret has written many things about how that is. But Iran consistently, since they overthrew the Shah of Iran and set up in their system as they chose, has been a country against imperialism, has supported the rights of the Palestinian people up one side and down the other, has made many strong alliances with Africa and with other countries that they do not necessarily agree with ideologically, but their fundamental anti-imperialism has made them a strong partner. When Venezuela was going through many different challenges, Iran sent technicians, sent help. And for those different reasons, we need to look at Iran in that context. I think that you say what is in contention is the growing economy of China, the growing power and influence of China, the growing shift in who and what is happening in the world. So this is a way to stymie China by attacking the oil and how that goes. It's also an attack on Europe, because Europe is heavily dependent on external forces for its energy needs. With the war in Ukraine, they cut off access to easy Russian oil. And so the U.S. chimed in and said, we can sell you gas at very high prices. The U.S. made a ton of money on that. Now you are at a point where, again, the energy prices go up. Europe, which is dependent on external forces to get it, they have to pay, which hits their industry. So it's a multi-pronged war going on many different levels. But again, and we have to realize that we are key parts of it. And so thank you again for having that conversation.
Well, thank you for that. And Margaret, I have to say this every time I'm on with you. It's such an honor. I have such high respect and admiration for
Oh,
you
thank you.
and the work that you've done. So it's just an honor and a pleasure to have us with you. The floor is
Oh,
yours.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, thank you so much, Charles and Inez Barron, for inviting me to be with Colette as well. I agree with everything she just said. There's so much to say about Iran, and she made a lot of important points. I'm glad that you entitled our talk Black Women Speak Out on the U.S. and Iran, because this war of aggression, and that's what it is, we're told that the United States cares about women, that this is every time the U.S. attacks people, bombs them, kills them, it claims to be done in an effort to help them, that human rights are so terrible in Iran. It's an evil country. Women are treated badly. Trump even said that women were being cut in half. Who knows what's rattling around in his brain that he said that. I know people who should know better. They spend a lot of time wondering about whether women have to cover their hair in Iran, and are they oppressed? And well, you're definitely oppressed if a bomb falls on your school. The U.S. bombed a school and killed about 170 people, children, and it was what they call a double tap. So they bomb first, they wait for rescuers to come. In this case, parents came to save their children and bombed it again.
Wow.
All under the guise of protecting human rights from the quote unquote evil Iranians and helping women who are allegedly so oppressed. I want to tell people this is a moment when we have to speak as anti-imperialists so that we are not confused. You may not like certain aspects of the Iranian state, but that's frankly not your business at this point. If you're a USian, it's your business to speak out against your government, which is waging a war of aggression, which has been waging war ever since the Islamic Republic of Iran was founded 47 years ago. Let's not forget, in the 80s, this is ancient history now, Saddam Hussein of Iraq was America's friend in those days, and he was used as a proxy to try to overthrow Iran. Thousands of people died. The sanctions, which deprive the targeted country from having any connection to the world financial system, food, medicine, infrastructure, all kinds of things are denied. So the U.S. has been killing men and women in Iran for years. And I think it's something very important for us. But if you're call yourself pro-peace or anti-war, you must be anti-imperialist. You must oppose the U.S. interfering with the sovereign nations. The UN Charter says every nation has a right to self-defense. It's international law. Peoples and nations have a right to sovereignty, and the U.S. violates those rights all the time, all over the world. So I would just like to start by pointing out those things.
Thank you so much, both of you, for your astute comments and analysis. And as we talk about this being Women's History Month and how the U.S. has been identified as the ones who, in fact, launched that missile that I did not know was a double tap. Yeah. And it's interesting that we share this kind of information with those who are interested, and whether we raise the consciousness level of those who don't understand the connection. It's not just happening in the so-called Middle East. There are other extensions of that are going on. And it's interesting also, as you pointed out, the UN Charter says that each nation has sovereignty and that you cannot interfere. You can't go kidnapping the leaders and bombing the innocent people who are there. And that has been happening all across that. And it's also interesting that as we're talking specifically about the United States, that this is Israel trying to become a hegemon, trying
Yes.
to enter into that and expand what it is that they are doing imperialistically, how they're continuing to expand what they have done locally with Palestine and now moving on to other areas and starting with Iran. So the US said, oh, they're about to launch missiles against the US as well as other folks, which has no basis in any kind of facts or data. So let's speak a little about how Israel is a part of that capitalism and how Israel, it has been said, forced the United States to get involved because Israel launched that attack.
Well, Israel, if I may start, Israel definitely wanted this. Netanyahu, their prime minister, has been to the United States 7 times in the past year. Not coincidentally, just a few weeks ago, before this attack started. Israel wants this. Israel wants a greater Israel, as they call it. Israel is a partner of the U.S. However, I want to point out that it's not just Israel that wants it. The so-called, they call Iranians hardliners. I don't even know what that means, but there are hardliners here who want the U.S. to have hegemony. As pointed out already, to attack China. China buys oil from Iran. Russia is close, borders close to Iran. Everything the U.S. does is not just the stated target, but it's also other countries. So Israel and the U.S. work very closely together. Their interests are intertwined. So I think it's always appropriate to blame Israel for attacking Iran or killing people in Gaza or wherever it is that they choose to carry out their war crimes. But there are forces here in this country who also believe that the U.S. has the right to control as much of the world as possible and to try to constrain China and Russia as well.
Absolutely, and I think the creation of Israel was designed with, in that part of the world, putting a European presence to control resource-rich region to keep people in check. Then they got willing allies in some of the more backwards elements of different nations surrounding it and created some of the dynasties, created some of the leaders. So even now you see, and I think I'll step for a minute to what Iran is doing. You see who is on what side and what is going on. I think Margaret's point around that the imperialist interests in the U.S., how they see maneuvering their pawns, of which Israel is one of their partners, but it is also tied directly to who is here, who helped to create the fact that Israel exists in that location for this challenge. Iran, in terms of its response to the attack, I think has been extremely brilliant in targeting those weak, or that's not the word, in terms of targeting the U.S. bases wherever they may be, in terms of saying this is the nature of the war, this is how we're going to fight it. We're not going to be myopic in how we respond, while at the same time, I think being careful of what targets are hit in terms of civilians, unlike what is happening on the other side. It is very much a struggle to say this is a global war and we're going to respond like that. Margaret, and maybe you have a view. I'm not sure how or who they have thinking these things through. What did they think? What did they think was going to happen? What did they think was step 2? Because clearly there have been many pronouncements by the Iranian government that if we are attacked, we're going to hit the U.S. bases. All you countries that have U.S. bases, we're going to hit the bases if we're attacked. Listen, we really don't want war, so please tell people not to attack us because we're going to retaliate to the bases on your land. So it wasn't a secret that this was going to happen. This was an openly stated, this is what we're going to do because you are housing U.S. troops. And then they did it, you know. So again, for us as Black people, we have to be listening and remembering. We have to remember that Iran did a stamp honoring Malcolm X. We have to remember way back when they took over the U.S. Embassy at the beginning of the revolution, they sent most of the Black people home saying, this is not your fight. You know, so again, we have to be listening very carefully and translating it back. When they spend so much money on this war, what is going to be cut in the budgets here?
That's right.
And did we vote for that? Did we think this was a good idea?
I've heard that it's at least $1 billion a day.
I can't even understand that.
And it has come. It has come to $16 billion thus far that has been spent on this war. Imagine how that money could be utilized. We talked about the crisis of homeless people who are unhoused. Imagine what could have been done if that money had been done proactively put into programs that would help people in need. But this is a war for the rich. This is a war for those who want to profit. I read that back in World War II, it was the GM and Ford and Chrysler who made weapons for both sides, both the United States and for those companies that they had in Germany. So this is a country that is in it for capitalist reasons, as has been said, and to increase, they think, their coffers and make them larger.
Yes, you're absolutely right. That's an unknown history. The fact that there were many U.S. businesses that did business with Hitler's Germany. So this is not the first time that capitalist interests have waged destruction all over the world. But to answer Colette's question, as to whether they were thinking this through, we're talking about people who are very arrogant. They are arrogant and stupid and racist. They believe in white supremacy. So this country in Western Asia with brown people can't possibly know what they know, can't possibly counter any thing that the U.S. does. The Iranians were surprised last year, the so-called 12-day war, when Israel attacked, and they were talked into having a ceasefire. But that was very controversial in Iran. There were people who said they gave up too soon. And in any case, in the intervening months, they have prepared themselves because they know the U.S. can't be trusted. So these negotiations over non-existent nuclear capability were used to actually as a pretext for war. So, so the U.S. has peace negotiations to then do their own negotiations and then say, aha, Iran doesn't want peace, so our war is justified. So the Iranians are no fools, and they readied themselves. And the U.S. has some big problems now. Iran has closed the Straits of Hormuz. Those collaborator Arab nations are now suffering. They can't even get food in. The oil markets are, everybody's paying more for gas, right? I think everybody understands that. But this is causing great havoc to the entire system. And this is what happens when an empire begins its decline. It's a moment when actually that empire is very dangerous. It's like a cornered, wounded animal. So the empire is in decline, but that makes it all the more dangerous. And you have these deranged, racist, stupid people who thought, well, we'll just assassinate the leader and it will all fall apart. Well, no, it didn't fall apart. The Iranian state is intact. And most people did support, I think it's fair to say, support their state. And of course, there are differences of opinion, as in any case all over the world, and especially now that it's being attacked, even the naysayers are supporting their state, which is defending them.
And I think to go back to something I think Inez raised earlier about the women of Iran. Iran has a very highly educated population, including its women. I think I read the statistics that they have one of the highest rated women scientists in the world and doctors, etc. And I remember as far back as the World Conference of Women in Beijing. So this was in 1995, and the sisters were all garbed down, and some European women were saying, "Oh, you're oppressed," and they're not like really quiet and shy people. They were like, "You just got the right to especially to the Swiss." They said, "You just got the right to have a bank account in your own name," and they were pointing out all the contradictions in terms of women's rights in Europe. How dare you say how we should look and dress and say, and who decides what happens? And I think, again, as Inez pointed out, we have to keep our eyes open and be really listening to different voices and not go for the okie doke.
Well, this is some interesting stuff. I think, Kimberly, you hit it right on the head. This is a declining empire, and it's very, very dangerous. We saw what happened when the British Empire, the sun never set on the British Empire. Now it's a little cloudy mud clot somewhere in Europe talking about Brexit and having all kinds of economic problems. And then the pound was the dominant currency. And they shifted after that conference in 1944 at the Bretton Woods Conference, when they created the IMF and the World Bank and the United Nations and NATO and all of them, and said we will control it with the dollar and gold behind it. All of that's declining. I want to pivot and come back to Iran, but I want to pivot to Cuba.
Absolutely.
We had a very good session with the December 12th movement. I had a sister from Cuba talking about the effects that it had on women and the entire population. But let's talk about Cuba and the danger that Cuba's in, and why the United States is signaling out Cuba, a tiny little island struggling, no threat to America at all. You remember way back with the Monroe Doctrine, who's going to control that whole area. Let's talk about Cuba.
Well, Cuba presents the threat of a good example, it's often said. So this fact that this small country, just 90 miles from Florida, as everyone knows, could have a socialist revolution, could take care of its people, is a threat to U.S. imperialism. They kicked out the capitalists. They kicked out the comprador class. They kicked out the lapdogs. And all of that made this country dangerous. And that's why it's been under an embargo, under sanctions for more than 60 years. Cuba can't, if you go to Cuba, you can't go online. You can't use money there. But despite that, Cuba has a good healthcare system. Cuba sent doctors to other countries, and the Trump administration is now threatening those countries. Caribbean nations, Cuba's neighbors, are sending those doctors back. I saw a story in Jamaica. People were waiting online at a clinic to get in before the Cuban doctors have to leave. It's terrible. And depriving Cuba, not just depriving Cuba of oil, saying we're going to sanction any country that does send oil to Cuba. It was one of the reasons for the attack on Venezuela. And they have had regime change in Venezuela. It's evil genius, I think, the way they pulled it off. It looks like there's a independent Venezuelan state still in control, but it isn't. So Cuba has been a target. It was Cuba that helped end apartheid. Fidel Castro sending Cuban troops to fight in Angola, to turn the tide against South African apartheid. Cuba is for the people all over the world. Cuba strives to help humanity, but that makes it dangerous to this country, which only believes in hegemony and control and naked aggression. And they hope that depriving Cuba of oil and gasoline is going to kill that country. I don't believe it will, but I think it's up to us to figure out how to help the Cuban people.
That's right. Colette, you know, when they said, and D12 says it all the time, when Africa called, Cuba answered. And now Cuba's calling, and we must do the same. We must answer. Colette?
Absolutely, because the bad example that Cuba has led is not only what it's done for its own people, because since 1959 made it one of the most literate countries, the child mortality rate, and it's a small, as Margaret said, it is a small country in the Caribbean. It's the largest country in the Caribbean, but that isn't saying much. It was a monocrop. Sugar was its only crop. It was not a developed country, but in the years of the revolution, it has done all the things that we have been speaking of. So, and that's an example, because then why couldn't the other countries in the Caribbean do the same? The other countries in Latin America do the same.
Right.
And if when you try to do that, you do get countries such as Venezuela, and I may differ slightly, but just in terms of what Venezuela was able to do under Hugo Chavez and under Maduro around the wealth to the people. And it's still disparity, but it is a tremendous change in terms of people's quality of life, which is why they are still not supporting the opposition. Why so many of the regular people, the Black and brown people, the working class people of Venezuela, stayed under tremendous economic pressure with the government, as is true also in Cuba, despite the conditions that have been imposed because of the blockade. And it's true in Iran as well, which is a country that, in terms of taking care of the people from a different ideology, but was not a country that promoted wealth inequality, promoted instead that there was a basic standard of living that people would have. Cuba is very much under attack. We cannot cease to talk about it, because that is one of the ways we concretely can support. Another way, of course, is there's a bill in Congress now that purports to lift the sanctions. And it is it's propaganda. It is the talk, it is the call, it is that no, we are listening, we are involved. And so that is our task. And I think you've done many shows on it, and this show on Iran is part of that whole continuum that we have to keep educating our people and mobilizing, because we do make a difference. We helped to shut down the war in Vietnam. We made so many changes in other policies. They don't give it credit. They're always like, oh, that wasn't anything. Oh, that was just this. No, we've had tremendous victories because of the work we have done as Black people. And we can't let them take that away from us. And at this moment, we need to stand firm on that and move forward.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly, and as one of the commenters said, yes, we as Africans must support them. And there was a program just last night, D12 sponsored a program talking about raising consciousness. And perhaps, Colette, you'd like to share some of the highlights of what was discussed last night and how we as Africans here in America can support the work through the different projects that do need financial support. Colette?
One of the largest challenges is energy right now. So a series of people have a campaign going called Let Cuba Live, and that is to buy solar panels, generators in a permissible way because of the sanctions is so difficult. But this is they have organized it in such a way that making these donations is perfectly well. It's called Let Cuba Live, and its main goal is to relieve the energy burden by helping it be churning around renewable energy. Cuba has already started. China has been instrumental in sending many the means of production, the solar panels, setting up solar farms. They are increasing it, but it's hard, and the more we can assist in that, the better. There are also different caravans and collections, but I think for us on this call, Let Cuba Live, the issue is energy. Let us pull all our resources into assisting with that. There was a delegation here for the Cuban for the United Nations Conference on the Status of Women. There was a challenge because the visas is a fight every year. They got fewer visas than ever, but they were able to come out to Brooklyn and discourse around the real pain people are facing with the lack of electricity, because you need electricity for dialysis and for incubators, in terms of sanctions prohibiting different medicines that affects neonatal, that affects heart diseases, that affects so many things that the Cubans had fought to bring to their people are now under attack because of the tightening of the sanctions. So indeed, the more we can talk about it and get people to support and donate, the better.
Right. Sister Kimberly, you know, it's very interesting how now with the rise of BRICS and particularly the success of the Sahel revolution in West Africa, and the puppet sellout government of Nigeria is so backwards that they allowed Trump to bomb their own country. Talking about he's after some people who are oppressing Christians. He's, anyway, some insane. But talk a bit about how the rise of Sahel and the rise of BRICS is having a profound impact on currency, particularly the countries that were being bombed and attacked now: Iran, Venezuela, Nigeria, Cuba. And in Nigeria, I understand that they sold oil into China in the yuan, their currency, and then the ruble, the Russian currency. They did the same thing in Venezuela and the same thing in Iran. So this is like a war against China, and using Africa, they're sending troops to Nigeria to perhaps attack the Sahel revolution next.
Yes, it's it's called you're describing multipolarity. The United States enjoyed a unipolar world after the collapse of the Soviet Union in the early 90s. And they wanted to keep it that way, that the US was dominant, that the dollar was dominant. Of course, other countries don't want that. And little by little, nations have been trading in other currency. This is a huge threat to the US. Now, if the U.S. could peacefully coexist with other countries, it wouldn't be a threat, but that's not what the U.S. wants. The Sahel Alliance of Sahel states, Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, all former French colonies, they've kicked the French out. There was a U.S. drone base in Niger. So this is a threat to the imperialist world, to the colonizers. And it's a threat too, because a Nigerian friend of mine was telling me people in Nigeria are asking, why can't we do this? Why do we have to live in this comprador state? Why can't we have real sovereignty and independence? But it's a weak puppet state. So I think it's important, first of all, to know that there are successes waged against the imperialist world. They are committed and they have solidarity in and among those three nations in the Sahel region of Africa, and they are fighting back with their revolution. They have declared their independence. They have there's a term for African countries. They call it flag independence or briefcase independence, where nations were allegedly independent, but still under the control of France or Britain. France is, they control the currency, or not of these three countries anymore, of their former colonies. France relies on nuclear power. Where does that uranium come from? It comes from Niger. They were paying pennies for it. And they were getting rich, and the Nigerians were still in poverty. So this is a very, very important moment. It's important for us to be in support of these countries and let people know. Africa's always disparaged. They can't get it together. They're ruled by stupid people or by corrupt people. And no one talks about the forces that are arrayed against them. But despite those forces, it is possible for nations to show solidarity and to break free from being entrapped by imperialism.
Correct?
I totally agree with that. It's a ongoing fight I have that when Africa does something good, it's on the back page of a specialized newspaper in small print. Just recently, and because it doesn't fit the narrative. Trump has been promoting this African health partnership one-on-one with countries, which has been rejected. Because as the president of Zimbabwe said, and the president of Zambia also rejected, I don't know all the countries, there was 350 million for health, to which Zimbabwe would then give all the data on its citizens in perpetuity. And it got tied up to the mineral riches as well. So it was on the one hand, well, here is money for health after they cut USAID and all those health, all the good parts of it. And we can talk about all the negative parts of it as well. But nonetheless, Zimbabwe said, this is an affront to sovereignty. We're not signing it. And furthermore, we believe in multilateralism, not one-on-one. We are not going for it. And the president of Zambia similarly rejected it. And we should look and see who else has rejected it, because this is one of the ways that Africa stands up, and it's on the bottom of the page, and we have to talk about it. And even when we talk about Nigeria, it is a country that built one of the largest fertilizing plants on the continent. That did not make the news. There are so many different things going on in Nigeria that are positive, but what we hear is the corrupt vacillation and justifiably so to be critiqued. But I think that all of our work needs to really push for what is the positive. What is the positive? What are the critiques? How do we build up that? No, Africa is strong, because Africa is very pivotal now. It is 1/3 of the countries in the United Nations are on the continent of Africa in terms of voting. 54 countries out of the 197, I think, in the United Nations in general. The push in support of Cuba at the United Nations is supported by Africa. That never gets talked about. In the Ukraine war, they tried to get Africa to denounce Russia and to side with Ukraine, and that did not work by and large. So the changing dynamics of the world, a world where you used to have, you could count on, they'll say yes, because what else is they going to say, has been changing and developing. And I think programs such as this and conversations to say, what are the shifting issues in the world as the U.S. has to resort to military because its soft power is no longer sufficient.
All right. So true.
It's not, and that's why it's such a vicious moment in history, because it used to be, well, you would just send aid and you'd buy the NGOs and they would take care of it in the host. Well, the money's funny, but when you go to war, well, you got to make those weapons. So somebody's making money on all that war being sent. That's 66, however much money has been spent. Somebody made all those things and will make some more and make money making them. So in this time, we have to look at what are the shifting forces in the world. I think this very interesting times we're living in right now.
Very interesting. It's always often said they do war for profits, not win, lose, or draw, just for profits. Make money, don't care who dies or whether they win or not, because they haven't won anything. Vietnam, Afghanistan, Iraq, they lost every time, but they made money every time as well. So war is usually for profit. Kimberly, can we talk a little bit about both of you about BRICS? It's not an alliance made in heaven. There are major contradictions with the countries involved, but I know the number's up to 20. And it's interesting how the global South now is having more domination in the world global economy than the G7 or the global North imperialist countries. I think it was very interesting that Trump lost a major case, although this is a Supreme Court that will support him most of the time. And when he didn't get his tariffs done the way he wanted them done, that was a major blow, because the tariffs he wanted, he could have put on anybody for any amount and for any length of time. They said no. You have to go to Congress. And don't be fooled by Congress. Congress just wants to come to him so they could say yes, and he doesn't say yes as a dictator. That's the only fight they're having. But this idea of BRICS, you're talking about 8 billion people being in the world, and they representing 4.5 billion of the world's population, and most importantly, about 45% of the gross domestic product of the world, whereas the G7 represents less than a billion people, 780 million, and 25 to 35% GDP. Let's talk about BRICS.
Well, the BRICS, there's, as you said, there are more and more countries that there were the five original members, as you mentioned. But every year, more and more countries want to be a part of this partnership, which holds a possibility of that multipolar world that I referred to. Now the dollar is still the world's reserve currency, but the goal is for that not to be the case. But that is what makes the US so insecure. Any little change, any possibility of not having complete hegemony, they behave as we've been describing since we started this conversation. So the BRICS hold promise. Cuba, for example, is now part of the BRICS.
That's correct.
The weakness of the BRICS, though, it's not a military power. The US is still a military power. The Iranians are showing, the US, it's funny, the US can't fight a long war. They hope to just bomb the crap out of somebody and then it's over. They know there's no popular support for, I hate the term boots on the ground, but to send in US troops, although they will. But the BRICS hold the promise of the other countries having a different pole. The G7, the US, Canada, some European countries. Basically, it's US and a few of their puppet states. But they have, and all the supposed differences between them, they all do whatever the US tells them to do.
That's right.
Frankly. But the idea of other countries using their economic power, China's Belt and Road Initiative, for example, that can be used to benefit the rest of the world, or at least to be in partnership with the rest of the world, and not to have domination, for that to be the only kind of relationship that can exist. China has forgiven, for example, the debt of many African nations. The IMF, the World Bank, they don't forgive anybody's debt. So these countries, and it's by design for them to stay in debt and to remain under the domination of the Western capitalist nations. So the BRICS shows a possibility of having a different kind of world.
Powerful. Colette?
I absolutely agree. And I think the issue of in what currency people trade is at the center of a lot of the discussion. One of the cardinal sins that Saddam Hussein did, and which led to his overthrow, is he started talking about, let us accept payment for oil in more than dollars.
Right.
Because the petrodollars is one of the reasons to sustain what is going on. The Libya under the leader Gaddafi was also talking about, let us have a gold-backed currency. The whole fight around, and what are we going to barter? How are we going to trade? Let us trade with each other. Or as they said in Zimbabwe, the look east policy. When the sanctions hit, when they took back the land and were attempting to crush the government and overthrow it 30 years ago, look east was, let us trade other than in Europe, which was their primary market, colonized country. And Iran, and when we talk again, was very much involved in building trade relationships in Africa, as is our other countries. So the whole tilting shift of the world, that BRIC represents something that is being born. And like all babies, there are weaknesses, you know,
Right,
but it
right.
is a different perspective. It is, we can look at ourselves. I remember being in a conference, and one of the other things that Cuba was always important for, it brought people together in dialogue on many different conferences, different places, times to think, times to see what a different world is possible. The late President Nyeri said, South to South. That whole concept that we have to trade within ourselves,
Right.
that the ideas are put out and then they take different forms, and it takes a long time. But capitalism has been around a long time. So these new ideas we have are just months in the making, really, when we look at the whole thing. So just as it took a long time for that to perfect, let us give ourselves grace, as they say nowadays, and
Right.
see how we can strengthen it, what we can see, because we can always find stuff wrong. This is the most corrupt country in the world, but they want to point fingers at Africa always. You know, let us build up our own strength, and let us, because that is much more productive.
Well, we have a few minutes left. We're going to let both of you make closing remarks. We got to have y'all back. This was awesome. It was powerful. I really mean that. You know, everybody says that when their programs end and they don't invite you back. We really.
I know where you two live. You know.
This was fantastic. I want to make a closing remark. I got to say this about Cuba. When Inez and I went to the Latin American school, the medical school, and we were talking to the students, 2 students got up and they said, "Hey, Councilmember Inez Charles, they were from East New York, Brooklyn, and they was there on a full scholarship." So we are eternally grateful to Cuba, and we'll always remember that Cuba allowed our sister Asada Shakur to at least like die on her own terms, live on her own terms, and not in some cage of the pigs of the power structure, just as Fidel died on his own terms, and so did Asada. So with that, Inez?
I want to say we're so pleased to have been able to get a resolution passed in the New York City Council when we did serve in the New York City Council, talking about the sanctions needed to be ended. So we are glad to have been able to do that as a part of what our position allowed us to do, and get our colleagues to make that statement.
We had some people checking in from Toronto saying right on, and someone else said, you know, right on to the sisters. They were powerful, very informative. Much respect to sisters, very informative. We had a chat come in. So closing remarks, all yours.
Sure. I'll just very quick. Thank you again. I want to tell people, beware of the false flag. We are already seeing these stories. Iran has drones off the coast of California. They need an excuse to get support to send U.S. troops to Iran. I don't believe anything they say about Iranian drones. There was an attack on a synagogue. I'm not in favor of that. But coincidentally, they had an FBI rehearsal or practice or something at this same synagogue a couple of months ago. What an interesting coincidence. So that is what people should be aware of. Stay awake, stay anti-imperialist, and be in solidarity with the oppressed people of the world. That is my message, and thank you both so much.
Thank you, Colette.
I add to that our presence has to be felt. We have to be in the street, talking to our community, marching in our community, and as a community standing up. Saturday, April 4th, the day where Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated, we're having a march in Brooklyn, down Fulton Street, to raise up the issues of what is happening to us here and what is happening globally. So my challenge to the people listening to the presentations is, we need your presence more than just listening. We need you to be in the streets and to be active. So April 4th.
Thank you so much. You've honored us, you've graced us, you've informed us, you've elevated us, and you've made us proud to be able to say that we have people in our own community who are informed, who are intelligent, who are accurate, and who are bold enough to stand up and give us the truth as to what the facts are that are happening. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We appreciate you.
And we
Thank
say
you.
continue to support independent Black media.
Yes.
Black
Yes.
Agenda Report, Black Power Media here on YouTube. WBAI, we have our program tomorrow. Two young dynamic sisters are going to be talking about the same thing that you're talking about. WBAI.org from 5 to 6 p.m. And come hear our sisters. And we say every week, the truth shall set you free and get you in some trouble too. You got to have some spine. And power is the great equalizer. Black power.
Black power.
Power to the people. Thank
Power
you.
to the